Hey guys, this is Justin with Brain Root and Technique is King. Today we have our second episode of the Technique is King podcast, and we talk with Coach David Ray, a strength and conditioning coach, and we talk with him about strength and conditioning related to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for competitors and non-competitors alike. I hope you enjoy. All right, what's up, guys? This is Justin with Technique is King and Brain Root. We're here with our second episode of the podcast, and of course, here with our first guest and host of the podcast, Jeremy Brown.
Hello, how are you, everybody?
And Jordan Evans.
Oh, God. Hello, I'm making a mess over here already. Sorry.
And today we have a very special guest on the podcast. His name is David Ray, and he's a strength and conditioning coach. He's a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a black belt in strength and conditioning. Is that all right for me to put that title on you?
Yeah, that works. I second that.
So David, before we delve into the topic of strength and conditioning and stuff, you work and co-own a gym, Resilient Health and Performance, and I want you to give a little bit of a background as far as your strength and conditioning background, and you can even go back as far as how I know you started playing baseball and stuff. So if you want to give us a little background about yourself, and then we'll get started into some questions we have for you.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I played collegiate baseball. I guess that's far enough to go back. And once I was done playing, I stayed on and coached for a year. I was at Lyon College, a smaller school in Arkansas.
Where did you play baseball at?
Lyon College.
He stayed there. And played.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I stayed on and coached for a year. And then once I was done, I moved back home. I'm originally from Iowa, so I moved back to Omaha, Nebraska. And then I started getting a little more into strength and conditioning. I started learning a lot of things that I thought would have helped me a lot as a player if I'd have known them at the time. And I decided to go to graduate school to pursue a master's degree. And I looked at a couple of different schools, and I decided to pick Middle Tennessee State University mainly because I wanted to chase a girl back here. So once I graduated, I started working at a gym in Franklin, and I stayed there for a couple of years.
Wait. Did that work out?
I did. I caught her, yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you were asking about the gym or the...
Yeah, they both worked out pretty well, I guess.
Doing well? Okay, good.
So then I started a gym in Brentwood with a couple of different guys and learned a lot there. And then I actually ended up joining forces with Dr. Josh Rankins, who is a chiropractor and specializes in soft tissue modalities, and that was in Nashville. So fast forward about 4 years, and there's a gym in Brentwood that the space opened up, and we jumped on the lease. And so we brought in another chiropractor who's the same thing as Josh, who is an ART specialist as well, soft tissue specialist, and Resilient Health and Performance was started.
Awesome. So we've got some questions as far as strength and conditioning goes for related to jiu-jitsu, but also outside of jiu-jitsu, because you only work with a few jiu-jitsu athletes, and you've worked with Professor Bruno Emerim, who is also a jiu-jitsu athlete in the past, and you're actually my strength coach, and I've been with you for about a little over a year. I think we're just about to hit a year, and it's completely changed. Like, I would say me as an athlete, but I wasn't even an athlete when I started. Like, now I feel like I'm becoming more athletic just from the training with you. So you focus, most people look at a strength and conditioning coach and they think like personal trainer. What is some of the biggest differences that you like to focus on compared to maybe like a traditional, what people see as a personal trainer? Because they may not see much of a difference, in those two titles, I guess.
Yeah, well, I don't know that there's a huge difference in titles. I mean, it's not that big a deal. What I think when most people are talking about a personal trainer, most of the time, personal trainers spend the majority of the people they work with are there to lose weight, or some sort of aesthetics. I mean, they want to look better, they want to feel better. where we're at in our gym, we specialize a little bit more in movement and helping people become better athletes, helping people who are in pain move better so they're now out of pain, and then helping athletes reach their goals. So it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily better or worse. It's just sort of the route we've chosen. So I think that's the biggest difference. Titles alone, I mean, people call me a personal trainer all the time, or they call me a strength coach or performance.
Yeah, but you're being humble. It is not the same thing. I've been in that world, and I personally chose not to go to like a box gym and do that because like keeping people motivated that aren't already setting goals for themselves as athletes when it comes to maybe not say athletics, but even working out. It's very difficult.
Yeah, there's no question. And when people ask me why I like working with athletes, I mean, the number one reason is they're already motivated and they have goals, and it makes it so much easier to program and to help them when they want to help themselves. Yeah, you're completely right. A lot of times, I guess when you're a standard personal trainer, whatever you want to call it, that's in some large gym, I mean, a lot of it's hand-holding.
Yes.
And people come in and they work out for an hour 3 times a week, and their diet doesn't really change, and they want extraordinary results.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't happen.
Work.
No, not at all.
Never.
So I'm very fortunate in that I'm in a position where I get to work with a lot of athletes and a lot of motivated people.
So even though you say a lot of people are motivated, I know when I mentioned you were going to be on the podcast, one of the guys I mentioned it to, I asked him to come up with any questions, and he was wondering how much of your job is the psychological aspect of managing motivating people in the gym and for their work outside of that gym, because you have athletes who are self-motivated, but I'm sure there's tons of athletes who aren't. So does that play into your training at all, or what you do in the gym?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is just constantly reminding them why they're there, and helping them keep their eye on the end goal. And I work with some people who are not athletes too, and keeping them motivated is just sort of, first of all, developing a really good personal relationship with them, but then just constantly dropping the hint of, let's remember why you're here. What are you doing outside of here? What are we doing for nutrition right now? All that kind of stuff. So usually with really high level athletes, it's not so much motivating them, it's sort of like reining them in, because a lot of times you get guys or females, really high level athletes, that would just want to go 1,000 miles an hour all the time. You constantly have to remind them that like there's a plan to all this. Like, let's constantly look big picture. Rome wasn't built
constantly running around on 10 on the runner side, just like let's go hard.
Yeah, and
that's how you get hurt.
Bring them back a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jordan, you had some questions written down. Do you want to shoot any of them towards David?
Yeah, since we were talking about the going to 1,000% thing, what about if someone has an injury? How do you make them try to take the time off? Do you present that to them as like, listen, for the longevity of your career, I suggest that we tone it back a bit? Or is it something, do you gauge the injury by if they can train through it, or how do you go about?
Yeah, well, I think there's always something you can do with an injury. So if someone, say I'm working with a jiu-jitsu athlete and ankle gets popped really bad, I mean, that's not really a reason not to train. Maybe it's a reason to take a couple of days off in the jiu-jitsu gym, but not necessarily with me. I mean, there's a lot of things we can do, and there's obviously tons of research that shows that the more you're creating healthy movement in the body, it helps the body recover. With an athlete, getting them back off in their actual sport, it's just constantly reminding them this is a big picture. You've got the longevity of your career. Sometimes you have to take a step back, and I don't know many athletes that are going to lose anything by taking a week off of their training.
No, I mean, cardio maybe a little bit, but if you can't train in your sport, you should be supplementing cardio instead of, but that's if it's possible. With your injury, I know that isn't possible. I had a knee injury, and right before that, you had started sending me, or you sent me to a YouTube page of Andre
Espina,
and Dewey Nielsen.
Yeah.
And that I have more mobility in that knee where I had a 60% tear in the MCL now with no surgery than I ever have. I can go all the way down into a deep squat. I never had the ankle mobility. I had an ankle pop rolling with our great friend Roman Omancheki Klaus.
He's Russian.
I didn't know he had a last name. I just knew it was Roman.
That's my
the
dog.
guy just throws people around.
Yeah, that's my dog. I love him. And so that helped me tremendously. Thank you. Would you like to talk about that experience, meeting those guys, and what that was like?
I owe a lot to both of them. I recently went to an FRC seminar, a functional range conditioning seminar in Oregon. It was actually at Dewey's Gym, Impact, training in Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, he owns that Impact Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, he does. I believe he does. And Dr. Andrea Espino was there, and I hesitate to always say things like life-changing, but yeah, it was fantastic.
It totally is.
And I think if they were here, they would say, I mean, you obviously found probably the reason why you hurt the knee.
Oh, yeah.
You fixed the things that were causing the knee pain to begin with, or the injury.
Mm-hmm.
You have to rehabilitate it correctly, and get that knee moving again. You can't take a joint and you get injured and then just lock it down and never deal with it and just hope that if I just rest it and take anti-inflammatories, it's going to get better. You're just going to hurt the knee again. You've got to actually go in, and the body will adapt, and it'll.
Yeah, I have to sit in my floor, which I've built a good routine of it at night when I'm either like reading on my iPad or watching TV or whatever. I'm in the floor now, and I'm constantly just doing like these basic movements that I see them do in those videos. And man, it's helped me tremendously. Thank you to those guys, to you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. I don't know that I've ever met two people who move better than those two guys do.
I've never seen anything like it.
Maybe Ido Portal, who I think they are. I know Spina is friends with, but to watch them move in person, to see what is possible with hard work and how the body will adapt and how that makes you bulletproof.
Yeah.
But I've been able to use a lot of that stuff with some of these guys, and then also just with some of my clients at the gym, and the results have been fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of anyone who's listening who go to just Google functional range conditioning, and you'll find out they host seminars, and like you did, just go to YouTube and type in.
It changed everything with the way that my body's moving right now. I had a little bit of experience with Z Health back in the day, and FRC seemed like Z Health on steroids. Like I just feel like there's a lot more movement. It may be based differently, but it was designed by a chiropractor, and I was trained by Belton Lubis and Kenneth J with that. But that FRC, man, when you get those guys down at your gym, I would love to come down there and talk to them.
Yeah, hopefully we can get them in. Hopefully sometime this year. They're incredibly busy. But it was a great experience. I mean, I've never been to a seminar before or an environment where like a quarter of the guys there are jiu-jitsu guys, a quarter of the guys are parkour guys, a quarter of the guys are
parkour,
rock climbers or movement guys. It was an unbelievable environment and a great thing to do.
So something I want to talk about, just as we're talking about, because it seems like you go to seminars and you're always educating yourself on different topics. How important is it as a strength coach, obviously just as a human being in general, but as a strength coach, to be open-minded in where you're receiving your information and implementing all that stuff in your training? Because I'm sure a lot of strength coaches, as with any field, as you get older and more experienced, you get more ego and more, this is the way it should be. So how important is it?
I don't know so much if that's the older strength coaches or like the younger strength coaches.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. But so how much do you think that comes into play as just being a successful strength coach and to get results, is to just be open-minded?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think it's key. I mean, it's a double-edged sword because you sort of have to stand for something.
Right.
Or else, you're constantly changing your workouts and your beliefs and what you should be doing with people. But I'm 100% open-minded, and I may read something and just say, I'm not sure. We'll test it a little bit, and it may end up being something that I don't 100% buy into. But I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm willing to read it. I'm not gonna become a worse strength coach by reading it. I mean, I can always pick up something. So I try and. Yeah, we try and everybody, the two guys I work with, or all the guys I work with, we're constantly reading things, constantly looking at videos, constantly sending stuff back and forth, trying it on ourselves, obviously, first before we would ever, try it on.
And you got
else.
certified in RKC, but way back.
Yeah.
Right?
I was HKC.
HKC, right. Yeah, the bro triathlete Marcus Hooper, he helped you out. RKC, Russian kettlebell challenge.
I
But he was at,
thought it was Roman kettlebell challenge.
And then what's the HKC?
well,
Hard style.
Hardstyle
It's like the
kettlebell
first
challenge.
entry, like tier.
to RKC, which RKC is a no more. They went out of business and it split.
They're still. They're still.
Oh yeah,
there,
they're still RKC.
Yeah,
they just split
There was
into
a
Strong
split.
First,
Strong
right?
First. Yeah, there was a split there.
Yeah, all the trainers at Strong First are growing their hair and beards out. I've noticed on Instagram.
Except for Pablo. He's not growing his hair.
No, he's not growing any hair.
Which I can't either. So
All right, so we talked a little bit about your background. Let's start talking more specific with strength and conditioning towards jiu-jitsu. We'll kind of split it up because a lot of people do jiu-jitsu. It's not just a major sport. Like there's professional athletes and people who are aspiring to be professional athletes to do jiu-jitsu, but also guys who are just, 30, 40 years old, train maybe 3 times a week, don't have much athletic background, and they don't have much time to maybe put in extra work outside of their family and stuff in a gym or anything like that. So this question you may have a hard time answering, but let's say for the general jiu-jitsu practitioner or the athlete, what are maybe like 3 beneficial exercises or things they should do just to keep their body healthy on and off the mats, as far as it could be anything. It could be stretches or mobility, whatever. Are there anything that comes to mind that you think that people would really benefit from?
that is a hard question.
Yeah.
I would say number one, and it's for both sides, is take care of your joints. Like get full range of motion in your joints, maintain full range of motion in your joints. There's a huge difference between the jiu-jitsu who's a competitor and the person who does jiu-jitsu because they love it, or they're sort of a hobbyist. If you're a hobbyist, you need to realize that health is the long-term goal. Yes. I always say health ends when competition begins. If you're a competitive jiu-jitsu guy, it's a little bit different. Now we may have to push the envelope a little bit, especially with competitions coming up, to make sure that you're moving optimally and that you're in the best condition you can be in. But they're 2 totally different things. If you're just a hobbyist, I think the best thing you can do is maintain joint integrity, range of motion, and then, I'm trying to think of a few exercises that I think would be optimal. Being able to do pull-ups is a good start.
Do you think flexibility would be more beneficial to someone that's just a 3-time-a-weeker, or?
No, I think it's
mobility in
beneficial.
general?
Yeah, I think it's beneficial to both. Not only having mobility, but being able to control that mobility. But it's so hard to pick exercises because I'm so used to having people come in and customizing everything for them. So, are you giving me someone who's maybe 50 pounds overweight and starting jiu-jitsu, versus someone who has a wrestling background from high school and college?
Right.
And still has a huge gas tank already and doesn't need a lot of conditioning work.
I think that bench press is the most important exercise.
And curls, of course.
Curls for sure.
Bench press and
Arnold
curls.
curls, preacher curls,
calf raises.
all curls.
Yeah, you got to keep the appearance of your legs being in shape.
That's a beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu, is the appearance of fitness does absolutely nothing for you.
Nothing. I love that. Those are the best guys to choke.
Yeah.
So that's for the regular athlete. So what do you say? This is just a question for somebody that's doing maybe 2 classes a day, every day, and supplementing with strength and conditioning. What's your definition of overtraining? Is it when you mentally start breaking down, or is it when your body just hurts? Is it a combination of those things?
When your body hurts, we obviously need to figure out why your body's hurting. Are you sore because you got, you went shin to shin on someone in the gym, or are you sore? Like, are we having joint pain? Are we having deep muscular pain? No pain is good. If you're having, muscular pain or joint pain, then you probably need to see some sort of therapist to get that dealt with.
But But what about no pain, no gain?
That's only if you're doing the bicep curl and all that kind of stuff.
So if someone is training that kind of volume for jiu-jitsu, would you suggest that if they're doing a hard strength and conditioning regimen to maybe do like 50% on their actual jiu-jitsu training, pick partners that will roll smartly with them just to advance the technique, or to go hard as well? And maybe pick your spots to go hard.
You can probably pick your spots to go hard, but as far
Just
as
don't go with berserker in the gym because you're trying to be hard.
As far as overtraining, I think it's pretty hard to actually do, especially if you're taking care of yourself. I mean, that's the thing. No one talks about overtraining is, how well are you eating? How well are you sleeping? Most importantly, do you have any stresses outside of your life? Are you 23 and unattached and stress levels are relatively low, or are you 35 and you have a high stress job and you've got kids at home and you're racing all over the place, and there's all kinds of different things that go into overtraining. But yeah, I mean, if you're feeling mentally fatigued, maybe feel a little sick, I mean, again, you have to think big picture, take a step back off from the gym a little bit and see how you feel.
Yeah, I think when a lot of people start out in jiu-jitsu, or anything really, you have all this energy and you want to go. But as you kind of get more training under your belt, and like I'm starting to learn, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 3 years. I'm starting to learn when it's time to kind of take a rest day, take a couple days off, and just like rest. It's not going to make a big difference in your
but it's so irritating when I come to your gym and you're wearing regular clothes.
Yeah,
I'm like, what the hell
tough.
is this guy doing over here?
Yeah, I mean, recovery is part of training. I mean, that's the idea behind having a training program instead of just doing workouts. I mean, when you have a long-term training program and you can constantly think big picture, recovery is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And so some days you may need to go in and it's nothing but mobility work or soft tissue work, or maybe you get on the concept rower and we'll just do I hate to say the word flush row, but do some sort of something like that, as opposed to coming in and going. You cannot be redlining all the time.
Right.
And that's one benefit of having,
particularly if you're drug free.
That's one benefit of having a coach. And obviously everyone can't necessarily afford it, but it's good to put that into someone else's hands. Like some days I'll come in, I'll say, hey, this hurts or whatever, and now it's you're making the decision, okay, let's just go light today, rather than, if it were up to me, I'm probably going to push through it and maybe end up hurting myself. So I think that's one benefit to, if you can get a coach, or even your instructor, like you got having someone to tell you when to maybe go light, or when it's time to push you and go hard,
get you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, then it's time to do it.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, I know guys who go to gyms who train on their own, and if you're there, you're probably going to do things you like to do. You're probably going to do things that you're good at. The reality is, you probably should be doing things you're not so good at.
Yeah, overhead squatting.
Yeah. Most guys I know go in and overhead squat on their own. But having someone who knows enough to look at you and say, these are the things you really need to be doing, and they'll make you do them. And then again, like you said, rein you in when you need to be reined in, and then push you when you need to be pushed.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. So with the rest, how much sleep should an actual athlete be getting? Is it the typical 8 hours, or is 6 hours good, and then maybe take a nap during the day, like a 2-hour nap?
I think that is the best.
Yeah.
But that's so hard to do unless you work at a gym.
Yeah. So what is adequate rest?
I don't get the naps in the middle of the day, and I work at a gym. I mean, I'd like to see at least 8 hours, to be honest. I mean, some of it's too, like, what's the quality of your sleep like? And for with sleep, I work with some law enforcement officers, and we always talk about, recovery for them. And a lot of those guys, the reality is they're not getting 8 hours.
They don't sleep.
No. And then in
high stress environment.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are the kind of guys I'm a little more concerned about overtraining, if they're actually doing some sort of, combat work, and then they're coming in and training hard, and then they're doing the night shift, and they're not sleepy. Yeah. And I mean, those guys, every time they go out on the job, there's a risk.
Yeah. Life or death.
How much of you do you, I mean, obviously I know just from working with you, but do you like to, like, before a training session, especially with guys like that, do you like to, like, kind of talk to them a little bit and see, like, how they're almost like an interview, like, how you feeling today, like what, and then do you change up what they may do for that day, or do you have it set
For every, I mean, I'll tweak things for every client I see. I'm not going to make somebody do something if I think it's a bad idea. And I'm usually, when someone comes in, I mean, most people I know well enough, I can just tell when they walk in, are we dragging a little bit? But I mean, that's why I ask, how are you feeling? You know, how's the knee? How's your low back? I mean, I constantly always try and keep a checklist of, you know, you've had low back issues in the past. You've had a knee issue in the past. Like, we constantly need to be asking those things, especially when you work with athletes, because a lot of times athletes just deal with them.
right?
Yeah.
And so they come in and they're just like, I'm not going to bring up my knee because I don't want to talk about it. And I'm sick of talking about it. And he's going to change my workout if I do. And I don't want to change the workout.
Yeah, I want to get stronger.
Yeah. And so that's part of my job is, how are we feeling? You know, how's the knee? What do we need to adjust? And build trust with the athlete that, you know, they know that I have their best interests at heart and will make sure that they get to where they want to be. They just need to listen to me.
Yeah.
All right. So for jiu-jitsu athletes specifically, I got a few questions right here you can take care of. How important is cardio? I know that, like you said, you tweak things from here on out. How much of your strength and conditioning, say if you're doing a 45-minute workout, how much of that in there is cardio? Do you prefer interval training for jiu-jitsu athletes? And let's just start there. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to use the biggest cop out that strength conditioning coaches use, and it depends.
Right.
Not acceptable. We don't accept it.
I need to know how much I need to be running right now.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where's that athlete at. If you bring me, you know, so we use Justin as an example. If you bring me an
Supreme
athlete,
conditioned.
yeah, yeah. If you bring me an athlete, Thor-like would be the best way to describe him. If you bring me an athlete that we feel like really needs to work on athleticism, he's rolling all the time, it's not really an issue. I'm going to, you know, conditioning is not going to be a huge part of the program in the beginning. I mean, I need to fix him first. I need to get him to move better.
That makes sense.
And when I talk about movement, creating better movement, or we always say, like, we look at an athlete, we're like, he moves really well. People are like, what are you talking about? And that basically just means that we feel like he moves really well in his sport and in general without a lot of compensation. Mm-hmm. Which means he's going to stay healthy. He's efficient. He doesn't waste energy doing very basic things. So that's the number one thing is what's the goal and what is he? Like, what is he? You know, if you bring me someone who's a little bit overweight, no gas tank, wants to be, you know, a competitor, then yet has no base level of fitness, maybe didn't play a sport. I mean, most high school or college athletes, and then they start jiu-jitsu, and if I would then work with them, I mean, their gas tanks are already pretty good, particularly if they were like a high-level wrestler. I mean, we will condition as they get closer to competition.
Right.
But they usually have things, I mean, they're usually just broke. Like, things we need to fix first. So I think everybody needs a base level of fitness. Like, and that sometimes that means like a little longer duration type. I mean, everybody's really high intensity interval crazy, and I love all that stuff too. But
that's why I'm getting nervous about it, because I've been doing that for like years, and I'm like, now that everybody's on it, I was like, it's got to be wrong. I was like, it's got to be wrong.
But I mean, I'll see guys who do, you know, some high intensity work, but they have no like just foundational base level fitness. You ask them to what a bike ride for 20 minutes and they're just like passing out.
Yeah.
And I do think that for most athletes and for most people in general, that's really important. And that's probably where I've shifted the most over the years. Is for a long time I was just like, oh, you don't need that. You don't need that. It should just be high intensity stuff and fast twitch. And I do think that there's probably a foundational level of just generalized fitness that everybody needs. And just because you're a high level athlete doesn't mean you have that. It means you probably had it at one point, but you can lose that.
Right.
And so we need to always make sure that we're constantly addressing that.
Like when I came in there, I thought I was in decent shape because I trained jiu-jitsu all the time. I never really gassed out with rolling, even with guys who are higher level than me. But then I got in the gym with you and I realized, oh shit, like I can't even do hardly any pull-ups, push-ups were hard for me and they hurt. I wasn't moving properly. And I know for a while you had me just on a GPP program, general physical preparedness.
Someone's been reading.
And that kind of put it into perspective for me too. I felt like, damn, I knew I wasn't really strong or anything like that, but it just made me feel like even just training jiu-jitsu a lot really isn't enough if you're not like moving well and doing can't do push-ups.
This makes me so sad because I train all the time through strength and conditioning, and I struggle to keep up with you in the mat.
But it's all different. And I want to talk about this too. You may get a really high-level jiu-jitsu guy and say he trains at a gym where he's not necessarily surrounded by a lot of high-level guys.
Right?
Like forgetting that he's not even a black belt. Say he's like a really talented brown belt, really high level, and he trains with maybe one other brown belt and a couple purple belts. But most of the time he's rolling with a lot of blue belts, and maybe he's got like his professor's a black belt. Maybe one other guy comes in once in a while. He may dominate and never get tired in the gym, but he's an outlier in the gym. Like his technique is way better than everyone else's. He doesn't have to put forth any effort.
He's not
really
pushing himself.
Yeah, he doesn't.
There.
He just dominates people, and he doesn't really have to exert any energy to do it. Fast forward 3 months when he goes to a competition and he meets that other super high level brown belt who trains with lots of really high level guys, who's used to being constantly pushed. He's probably going to struggle. So, sometimes those guys, those really high level guys need to condition as well. That's, again, it all depends. What kind of guy are you bringing me? And that's something we have to look at. Are you dominating all the time because you're in really good shape, for lack of a better term? Or are you dominating all the time because you're just better at your skill and your sport than everyone else that you train with?
Yeah, makes sense. I think I need to train more jiu-jitsu.
I'm in no danger of being the guy that's like the super high level skill guy.
No.
I'm exerting all of my energy.
All my strength is going straight into you.
Yeah.
What do you think so let's talk about training volume a little bit. Let's split it up. So just general days a week, maybe, obviously it depends on the program and stuff, but let's say someone who doesn't train, because people ask me all the time when they start jiu-jitsu, or guys in the gym who just are hobbyists, they ask like, how many days a week should I work out? Or, and my answer is always show up to the mats. If you have the time, like, come train, do jiu-jitsu. Obviously, I don't know if you're going to necessarily be the healthiest person as far as movement and joint mobility and stuff. If that's all you do, you got to do different things.
I guess you could be, but I would find it hard to believe if all you're doing is jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
There's definitely holes.
Dude, your back is going to be messed up if all you're doing is jiu-jitsu all the time.
Right. So for the general hobbyist, what do you like? Should they work out 4 times a week, 2 times a week? Are there any maybe programs you recommend them to just try out or anything? I know it's tough, obviously.
There's a really good gym in Brentwood they can come to.
Yeah, Resilient Health and Performance.
Yeah.
But do you have any advice on that? Because I see a lot of people kill themselves outside of the mats, and then they come to the mats and they're tired and lethargic, or I see guys go and just hop on machines, and I want to tell them, like, man, I don't know if that's the best thing for you to do, just doing freaking chest flies or whatever they're called.
Yeah. Curls.
Yeah. So yeah, do you have any thing to add to that as far as maybe how much they should work out outside of the mats? And obviously it depends on the athlete. It's tough to
Well, I think that jiu-jitsu is a sport. And you can't really use sport as, I say this to people all the time, you can't use sport as fitness.
No.
Like, sport isn't inherently healthy.
Competition is bad for you,
yeah,
for sure.
That's pretty good. I like that. I've never really thought about it like that.
I do have, I'll have 45-year-old women come in who are recreational tennis players, and I get in arguments with them all the time about, I say, what do you do for your exercise? Well, tennis is my exercise. I'm like, tennis is not exercise. It is a sport. And sports beat your body up.
Yeah, they're just torquing their joints back and forth. That's what they do.
Yeah.
That's not good.
So you're looking at it as a standpoint from what do humans naturally do as far as work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Damn.
That's why he keeps
That
mentioning
put it in
movement,
perspective
you know?
for me a
But-
little
yeah,
bit.
right.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like
picking
that.
things up, setting things down, walking, running.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like those type-
Deadlifts, walking, running. Man, I've been getting into
getting chased by lions.
I've been getting into like distance walking through like hills, uneven ground, natural, and that has been helping my hip mobility. It seems like, or
I
something.
mean, moving the way human beings were
yeah,
designed to move is
yeah.
good for
Like
you.
trekking through the woods.
We're
like
not supposed to be
made.
sitting on iPhones and playing video games.
Yeah, I'm not supposed to have my neck torqued all the way down, looking down at my phone all day, creating this massive Igor hump. No.
But I mean, to answer your question, I mean, I think one mistake I see a lot of guys make is you'll get a guy who trains 3 or 4 days in the gym, and I'm talking about training, not jiu-jitsu, when he does this, and then he joins a jiu-jitsu gym, and he falls in love with it, and he starts training 3 days a week, and he pretty much abandons any of his old training because he's like, well, now jiu-jitsu is my training.
Yeah.
It's a huge mistake. I mean, he should be at least doing a couple of days a week in the gym, maintaining everything that he's built up to that point, just to help keep him healthy from the jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely.
So I think to answer your question in a very long way, you need at least 2 days a week in the gym doing, some stuff. If nothing else, just offsetting your job, which most people have a sedentary job where they're sitting, and then offsetting the damage they're doing to their body in jiu-jitsu. Because, I mean, let's face it, we do, we're in a seated position, flexed, hunched over,
It's terrible.
reaching for each other's lapels.
It's
And then
terrible.
and there's a million things that are really, really healthy about jiu-jitsu that I love, but there are things, I mean, it is a sport. And guys are trying to crank joints and, guys trying to attack your neck and you're like flexing as hard as you can to prevent that. Yeah. Yeah. So, you do need to be doing some stuff outside of the gym, if for no other reason, just to offset all the damage that's being done to you.
What do you think are some of the common things, just because you are a practitioner of jiu-jitsu, maybe as far as mobility that you see restrictions in some of the few athletes you've seen? Like for me, I know my thoracic spine was kind of messed up as far as from being overweight and just bad posture and different things, but also like you said, in jiu-jitsu you're sitting with your shoulders rounded forward a lot and you're hunched over playing guard a lot, and look, I could barely even use my shoulders. I couldn't even retract my scap.
I didn't even realize that my shoulders were that messed up
Right.
until, we kind of started doing that stuff at the same time.
Yeah.
And man, like you said, you said it one time, it's like all of a sudden you have full motion where you were just using your arms before. It's like now your back is doing the work.
Yeah, I can actually feel my shoulder blades move when I do push-ups, and I can pinch them together. When I first started working out with you, you would say, squeeze your shoulder blades together, and I would be like, oh, I'm trying, and like nothing's moving. So
Your scaps didn't move at all.
yeah. So what are some common restrictions you think might come up with the general jiu-jitsu practitioner, or even the competitor? Because I'm sure a lot of it's going to be the same stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think thoracic spine is probably a pretty big one. And you have to remember, too, I mean, even competitive jiu-jitsu practitioners, a lot of them still have
Terrible
regular
movements.
jobs. Yeah, and
Yeah.
they may not necessarily move well. So thoracic spine would be one. I'd be checking the hips and make sure, see how well their hips move. A lot of guys do move really well, but not everyone. I'd be checking just their neck in general, like how well do they rotate each way, how do they rotate, and then flex in each direction, how well does that move? I mean, you'll find all kinds of compensations and restrictions there. What's their shoulder range of motion look like? I mean, it's pretty much everything. I mean, I want to make them a human being again and then make them a better jiu-jitsu competitor.
I can flex in any direction. Yeah. All right, Jordan, any other questions you got over there?
Yeah, this is one that comes up a lot, especially between a bunch of guys at the gym, is supplementation. So at what point do you feel that someone, a normal, not even normal person, but normal to like a high range athletic ability person, at what point do they need to supplement their training? Like, can they do all of that through diet, or is supplementation at a certain point actually needed?
I mean, I think that there are certain supplements that are definitely, if they're not needed, they're not going to hurt you to take. I mean, I feel like everyone can benefit from fish oil. I feel like everyone can benefit from vitamin D3. I feel like everyone can benefit from a probiotic. And again, these are, for most people, incredibly boring supplements. So if you think I'm going to say, yeah, I think you're probably ready for the nitric oxide explosion, no, I don't believe in that stuff. But I think all that stuff is beneficial. I mean, it just goes back to the healthier you are, the better your body functions from the inside, the better it's going to function on the outside.
So if you're looking at a guy that's, say, taking, before he goes to the gym, he's taking NO Explode, and then on days he's not just going to the gym, he's taking creatine and amino acids and a protein supplement. Is that wrong, or?
No, I'd probably leave out the NO Explode. But no, I think creatine has been proven to work, and I think amino acids are healthy. And I think, again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier with the overtraining, there are supplements like these types of things that I think can help prevent overtraining. But yeah, the word supplement, just listen to the word. It's a supplement to what your diet should be. So, if you're not eating well and then you're just taking all these supplements and you think they're going to help that much, it's just not going to happen. The most important thing is that you have. Yeah, everyone is at some point. But the most important thing is that you have your nutrition down and really dialed in, and then use the supplements. And that's when you're going to get maximum benefit from them too.
Yeah. Do you feel that nutrition stands in the way of most everybody that does any type of training?
Yes, there's no question. I've had people, and if you're looking just strictly for weight loss, and someone came to me and said, all right, I can afford to eat really well, because apparently everybody has this belief that it's really, really expensive to eat well. But if I can afford to train with you, or I can eat well, and their only goal is to lose weight, they're much better off just eating well.
Yes.
Because training with me, you train with me 3 days a week, that's 3 hours, and then you're going to go back and just destroy all of it with poor nutritional habits.
I wouldn't even come back after the first day. If I was eating bad, I'd be like, it's not worth it. I'm just going to continue to eat bad. It's so hard. Training, if you're an athlete at peak condition, I think that you can eat bad and get away with it more often than if you're not.
Yeah, you have a ton of output. Calorically, it's got to come from somewhere. Now, it's not preferred to come from there, but yeah, I would think that you're right. You probably do get away with it a little bit more.
Yeah. But again, you feel like just trash. Like I remember when Bruno Almarim was our professor. I would be working so hard, and then I would go to Five Guys, and Gary Tonin says it's tried and true, and it doesn't hinder performance. But man, as soon as we'd start the regular jog around the mat, I would be like, But I think maybe I have a gluten intolerance as well, so I don't know. Not
it's because you're a mouth breather, I think.
Yeah, heavy mouth breathing.
Nutrition. I think people overcomplicate nutrition too. Nutrition, I've always say, it's not easy. It's difficult to stay disciplined.
But it's simple.
Yeah. It's not complicated. Mm-hmm. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. No one's under the belief that, crushing a full pizza and 6 beers is the way to go.
I heard that's the best post-workout meal, actually.
Yeah, it's carbs, right? It's energy, right?
Yeah. Everyone knows what you're supposed to eat for the most part. And everyone's like, well, what about this diet? What about that diet? 99% of it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
Just eat clean and eat a lot. If you're trying to gain weight, or you have, high work output and you're training all the time, and if you're trying to lose weight, eat clean and eat less of it. So unless you're trying to walk on stage in a bikini, it doesn't have to be any more complicated.
If any of you guys are walking on stage in bikini, I need to know now.
I'm trying to walk on the mat with a bikini.
So basically, for the diet, just try to stick to things that are from the ground and not out of a bag. Yeah. It's just general.
Well, I watched. You guys saw it. There's this incredible video going around on YouTube from this PE class. I think it's La Sierra High School in California from like the 60s. And these high school kids are ripped.
They are shredded.
And I'm sure the training program looks fantastic, and I'm sure that's a huge part of it. But it's the 1960s. They didn't have a tenth of the crap that we had to eat now. Those kids were all probably eating pretty well.
Yeah.
And they are shredded.
Yeah. They didn't have Stouffer's or Hot Pockets back then.
Yeah, you basically went home and ate what your parents made, and most of the time that wasn't processed.
It was real
food. It was real
there
food.
Was less GMOs back then, which I'm not huge. I think GMOs are necessary at some point, but the the fact is that the nutrition of food was better back then, for sure.
But I do want to say, I do think a post-workout shake is good if you're training a lot. I mean, I do think those things that you mentioned, again, with the exception of the nitric oxide, are good things. I mean, I think that you can't go wrong taking creatine and fish oil and vitamin D3 and a probiotic. And there's some things that are really, a good multivitamin. I think all those things can certainly help. But if your diet's trash, I mean, the benefits you're going to see aren't going to be what you think.
Have any of you guys used the StreamTech Sport?
No, but I ordered some and it's on the way. So we're going to give it a whirl this next month because I've got enough to
hoard
split
that
it, so we'll
stuff.
see what goes on.
Like, I carry it in a little bag to jiu-jitsu with only
made out of
2
leather,
or
has a
3
little
of them.
stamp on it?
Oh my goodness!
You shouldn't have said that. You're going to come in one day and one of us is going to take it out of your bag. You're going to be freaking out.
Dude,
the days of day you go,
panic
hey,
Where's my shrooms?
I get more nervous sometimes when I don't have that than when I don't have my knee brace, and my knee was jacked. So,
What am I going to do with Roman? I don't have my shroom tech.
dude, and next I'm gonna stack it with that T plus. I heard you can go super hard with that.
Yeah, I'm waiting on the T plus. I have it, so we're just waiting to put that into action.
So Aubrey, if you're listening, here are the guys for you.
Yeah,
On
we
it,
need
guys.
sponsorship.
We're
Yeah,
on
we
it.
have Alpha Brain right here on the table. So
2 bottles.
shout out to Honor. for
2
that.
bottles.
All right, let's we're going to take a little break. I know last time I said there's going to be a commercial, and this time I will for sure put something in between our little break, and we will be right back. Hey guys, for our commercial break, all we're asking you to do is to go to our podcast on iTunes. You can find it under Brain Root or Technique is King, but we're assuming if you're listening, you probably already found it. If you could please like and subscribe, as well as leave a little review and let us know what you like about the podcast or don't like about the podcast. But hopefully you enjoy it. Also, please take a look at our website, letyourbrainroot.com. as well as our facebook.com/letyourbrainroot. Thank you for listening, and here we go back to the podcast. All right, we are back from our great break. Let's talk first. Jordan, the beer connoisseur over here. What are you drinking over there, buddy?
Well, what I started out with was a beer from Goose Island, which was a lambic beer, which was it's a sour. So
Was it called Lolita?
No, what is that? Is that a joke?
I thought that's what it was
If
called.
you have more than one, do they become Geese Island, or how does that work?
No, it's just Goose Island. But what a lambic is usually a beer that's I think it's from Belgium, and the way that they used to ferment these beers is once they'd make the wort and everything, they would just let it ferment naturally by sitting out in the open, and the natural yeast from the actual air would get into the tanks and ferment the beer naturally. And whenever wild yeast ferments a beer, it throws off this sour flavor to the beer, so that's why it's dubbed as a sour. But they also have these strains of yeast that they've isolated that you can actually pitch into the wort and ferment it, and it throws off those sour properties. So that's where just a regular sour is, and I think that's the difference between a lambic and a sour. And so what we're drinking now,
Is this part of the supplementation
Yeah,
program?
yeah,
or something?
that
this
must-
is
that must have-
carbohydrates.
that
This
must-
is my post-workout.
That must have been a long label for you to memorize all that stuff there.
He's over here Googling the beer. he's
No,
drinking.
I've actually brewed 3 batches of beer myself. Yeah.
Jailhouse hooch.
No, I've actually
You're
I went
leaving
the
it
whole
open,
nine. I
throwing
poured,
oranges and loaves of bread and pounds of sugar, just letting it
yeah,
ferment.
and, what do they use? Prunes.
Putting
Yeah.
putting roofie in a drink does not does
not
not mean
brewing,
you brewed
okay?
it.
No, I've brewed 3 batches of beer and I've kegged them all. I never did any bottling, but I've messed around with it a bit.
Bottling's never mind.
Yeah, and then so now what we have is Founders Imperial Stout. I think Founders is out of North Carolina, I think, and an Imperial Stout is just a stout. It's a dark beer. The name Stout originated, I think, in Scotland, and it was from a type of brew that the Scots would drink that was a higher alcohol content, which is why I got the name. stout. And imperial stout just means it's a stout on steroids, so it's going to be a very high
so
alcohol
strong.
content. Yes, this one is very strong. It's 10.5% alcohol, and
I see Jordan in a whole new light right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's so smart.
Yeah.
And it actually has quite a bit of alcohol bite.
Did you say stout or Silva? Because I heard steroids and I wasn't sure.
Either one, they're both black and they're both on steroids.
Jeez. He went there.
All right, so let's talk. We talked a little bit about the negatives of what jiu-jitsu might do to your body or will do to your body with enough time. As with, like you were saying, and you put it in a whole new perspective, that sport doesn't necessarily mean fitness or health. So let's talk about the positives that you see with jiu-jitsu doing for people.
Yeah, well, I think any type of grappling, and mat work is really good just for the body in general. I think that's a whole level of movement that most people completely ignore. I think a lot of things you can do, particularly like in the warm up, like different types of rolls. A lot of guys have now gone to a lot of like the animal movements for a lot of the warm ups, which I think are all fantastic. Yeah. And I just think a lot of the stuff, especially if you're rolling light, there's a lot of just benefits that can happen. And I think just learning the body awareness and interacting with someone else and getting some spatial awareness and understanding how your body moves is really good. I think doing rolls while someone's chasing you and trying to take your back and smashing you is probably not quite as good for your body. But like I was telling you guys, the number one reason why I put my son in jiu-jitsu at a young age was for those benefits. I wanted gymnastics or some
body awareness that comes with the balance and the getting a good base, things like that. Yeah, that's interesting. With movement in general, when you come back to fitness as being what you need to have as a baseline, so movement is really coming forward right now with the people that I choose to follow, and really, you put me onto this train. I was already kind of on it with the Z Health and all that stuff I was learning, but I think that movement is so it's not with common day. No one does it. Like, no one really moves. Like, my family around Christmas time, because that's the only time I see my family. No one laughed.
I didn't know.
I felt sorry.
I actually started. I was crying a little bit.
I laughed. I'm like nervous.
I'll get you a Christmas present.
So no. I see you on Christmas.
We can have Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So when they sit on the ground, because there's never enough chairs or whatever, or couches, when they go to get back up, I mean, they gotta like roll and like get momentum back and forth.
Hope something is close by to grab a hold of that's sturdy.
They look like Chris Farley trying to get up. Like
Ruben doing an arm bar.
But so, what is it about hip movement? Or talk about the ankle to the knee to the hip, okay? Because that is a system, right?
Yeah. Anytime. Go ahead.
Continue, please.
I was going to say, anytime you have a joint that doesn't move optimally, it's going to put stress on one of the joint above or below.
Right.
So if you have a hip that doesn't move well, it's going to either cause the lumbar spine or the knee to compensate in some way.
Right.
Because you're going to get movement somehow.
Right.
Particularly if you're in a sport.
And it also crosses over left or right. So after my knee was healing, I did take several months off. But when I went back, I hurt my opposite ankle. Yeah. And I have a feeling that it was because I was jerking upward on my hurt knee, and I tried to support myself with my ankle too quickly. It was a very fast-paced thing, and I snapped my ankle. So that it goes right to left as well, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's why squatting is such a great assessment tool. Is you can watch someone squat and you can find out stuff about their ankle, which most people wouldn't think about.
Do not have ankle movement at all. Dorsiflexion and anaflexion.
Yeah, and that makes squatting
so
really
much
hard.
easier
When
if you have it.
If you
When
have
you-
it,
when
yeah,
you have it.
absolutely. And it makes it, to be honest, I mean, you probably have no business. You certainly have no business loading the squat if you don't move optimally at the ankle or at the knee. But yeah, so the body's a chain, and there's a guy named Gray Cook who's a physical therapist who has a joint by joint system, and
FMS.
it goes. Yeah, he has the FMS, and his joint by joint system is the ankle needs mobility, the knee needs stability, the hip needs mobility, the low back needs stability, and it just kind of alternates back and forth all the way up. And that's the number one thing we look for, and certainly the number one thing that my two business partners look for is how well do those joints move.
Right.
Because when you sit at a desk all day, or females who wear high heels, or if you wear shoes that you're constantly locked, like guys who have to wear boots for work, or and like my biggest pet peeve is I'll get high school kids come in and they've rolled an ankle and they've got like an ankle brace on. I'm like, what do you have an ankle brace on for? Well, I have to protect my ankle. I'm like, we're in a completely controlled environment here.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you're in competition to brace it or to tape it. It's another thing when you're just doing everyday movement or you're training. I mean, training is when you should be actually trying to get that range of motion back and get the strength back and get
that's
the body to
where
adapt.
scar tissue and stuff builds up, is when you have the lack of movement, and then it'll just get hardened and you have inflammation that happens.
And Spina talks about this. I mean, it's just when you brace that and you immobilize it, you don't reintroduce movement, the correct type of movement to it, the body has no idea how to heal it properly. So it just starts healing in like whatever range of motion you have it in, and so then it just gets stuck there.
Yeah.
And so that's why we said earlier, reestablishing range of motion in all those joints is the most important thing you can do, because it all affects each other. The body's completely a change.
Does that increase the potential for re-injury of that joint if you constantly immobilize it? Like a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu pop fingers from grips and stuff like that. Is that actually crutching yourself by taping that every time?
Yeah, again, I don't know if like while you're rolling it necessarily is, but yeah, you certainly shouldn't have them taped if you're in
Hands
the
taped.
weight room then, or if you're,
If you do, you're a queer.
I mean, if you were podcasting right now with like your fingers
Well, I feel
taped,
kinda
I'd be a little
weird, but-
concerned, but
But how are people supposed to know if I train if my fingers aren't always
it's true.
there?
It's true.
You gotta get shirts, man. Shirts.
Just keep rubbing your ear against the wall and stuff.
Technique
so you
is
finally
king
give yourself
shirts.
cauliflower ear.
Okay, so let's run through some exercises. We can list some exercises, and you can maybe elaborate on the benefits or whether they're not beneficial for jiu-jitsu and just general, health and strength and conditioning. I know one thing I love doing that I didn't really start doing until I was working with you is the Turkish get up. We do it every day as part of the warm up. We do two reps each side. And that movement so we call it the technical lift in jiu-jitsu or technical stand-up. But that's the most efficient way to get up from the ground is to get up in that technical lift type position. So the Turkish get up, when did you start using that in training? And do you use that with all your athletes, even outside of jiu-jitsu?
Pretty much everybody who comes in our gym learns
That
the
is
Turkish
a
get up.
staple. I
Yeah.
do that every week.
Pretty
Tell
much
you what, I haven't
everyone.
done it with a kettlebell, but when I get into X guard, I do the technical stand up from there.
Right.
And that
It's a
movement
Turkish
feels
get-up.
so tight and powerful.
I was just gonna
It's
say
amazing.
when Professor Bruno was still here and I was doing a lot of privates with him, he was teaching me like an X guard sweep, and I just kept getting stuck, and finally he was like Turkish get up, and I was
Yeah.
there it is,
Yeah.
and from that moment on, that's
got it,
yeah.
man.
But
Yeah,
we
I
do that movement all. I mean, it's unbelievable for shoulder stability, shoulder mobility, hip mobility. I mean, it just sort of taxes everything, and you can do it.
It's the
pretty
full
heavy.
body
You can do
exercise.
it loaded, pretty heavy.
If you're a man,
Yeah, right now I'm
do
doing,
it with the beast.
I'm doing like 32 kilos, not to brag a little bit, but so the Turkish get up, yeah, I love that. I mean, after doing it, even if you do it kind of heavy, like you just feel like ready to go and loose. And
If you gave me someone from the gym and you said you're going to do one exercise, I want you to really teach it to them. They're going to perfect it, and they're going to do it 4 times a week. We could do Turkish get up, do 20 minutes 4 times a week, and that person would be much better
Oh my
off.
God, they would be
I mean,
so sore.
And they may never be like a monster from doing that. We obviously would want to do a lot more than that, but they would be so much better off than they were after like a month.
Yeah.
And that's 4 days a week, 20 minutes at a time of really. And the weird thing about Turkish Get Up is a lot of people have a hard time understanding it who come from a training background of trying to get the pump or the burn, because you don't really feel that kind of stuff when you're doing a get up. And so I always just describe it as practice. Like when you're doing a Turkish get up, every step of the way you should be constantly trying to practice it and perfect it. Yeah,
Technique is king.
Yes, it is. And you need to go, in my opinion, so you said you've never really loaded it. You need to do it like when they first teach it, you put a shoe on your hand. That way that you keep that perfect. If the shoe falls off, then there's something wrong in your technique. Right?
You just make a fist and put your...
And then set your shoe on top of it, and then you run through the technique trying to keep it perfectly.
So keep the shoe horizontal.
Yes. And
that's how we teach it. We start everyone with a shoe or something.
I had to do it with the damn shoe for 2 weeks when I first started doing kettlebells. They wouldn't put a bell in my hand. I was so...
And what you'll see is people have really poor shoulder mobility. That's extremely hard. Like when they get right sort of in the middle where you sweep the leg underneath, where it calls for a lot of shoulder mobility, they have a really hard time with that.
I think that's helped probably my shoulder mobility and being able to hold something overhead, because like I said, my thoracic spine I had problems with and stuff, but now I easily hold it over my head and keep my elbow locked out. So Turkish Get Up, guys.
How important is deadlifts and like powerlifting movements and the Olympic lifts?
Well, when you say powerlifting movements, you're talking about the traditional deadlift, squat, bench press. I think deadlift is the best thing you can do.
I agree.
Even if you're not going to load it heavy, I think just learning the hip hinge movements and it taxes. And if you do it heavy, once you learn how to do it, there's so much grip work involved, shoulder stability and integrity. I think done properly, it can rehabilitate your lower back and make your lower back stronger, and make your hips stronger.
Absolutely.
Through your chain.
Not to cut you off real quick, but you remember you said the guy that used to be in strength conditioning, started jiu-jitsu, was training and abandoned. I did that, not right away, but when Bruno started training, I was training jiu-jitsu so much that I just kind of put strength and conditioning to the side, and my lower back got hurt. And it was because I'd been deadlifting for years at that point, for like 4 or 5 years, and I just cut it out, and then all of a sudden I'm bending and crouching and hunching, and my back got messed up fast. It was probably only like 3 weeks of just nothing but jiu-jitsu, and I had to get back in the gym and take a couple of days off and start deadlifting 3 times a week.
Bench press I'm not a huge fan of for a lot of the obvious reasons. I think most people don't do it correctly, and I think it's just sort of... I think there's a lot of other things you could do. And again, with exercises, there's not really a bad exercise. They're all just tools in your tool belt. But when you're looking for the most bang for your buck, I think that, and especially when you're dealing with athletes where there is a risk, like you don't want to hurt someone. Like, ultimately, especially with, some of the guys I work with, I can't hurt them. They make a lot of money. And they mean a lot to who they're with. And I don't, that's always in the back of my mind. And so there's certain exercises that I'm going to eliminate and find a better alternative.
And he's not talking about jiu-jitsu athletes. He's talking about professional baseball players.
Serotonin is not in Tennessee.
So what about the squat? Because I know working with you, we never back squat. Maybe I'll get into front squatting as I get more into the Olympic lifts, which I've started doing. But a lot of our leg work is single leg work, lunges, split squats. How do you feel about, like, I know I've asked you in the past, like, well, are you trying to get good at the squat? Like, meaning like a heavy, powerlifting type squat, then, why do it? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just most people can't back squat that well, to be honest.
I had to give it up.
Yeah, and some people, they front squat better. But even then, I'm just not totally sure. And I'm always open to, I may change my mind, but I'm not sure that loading a squat really heavy is as beneficial. I think you should be able to squat.
Yeah, the better question is, can you go all the way down in the squat? Is your ankle, your knee, and your hip in the
I think you should be able to squat and own that movement and we can still goblet squat. There's all kinds of variations we can do. I don't think you need to load a back squat. And we should probably say this too, is when you're doing these exercises, remember what the end goal is.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're going to mimic a power lifter, understand that
You can't lift as much as him.
Well, yeah, and his goal is to squat as much as he can. Compensations are going to come in. He's going to try and I don't mean this in a negative because it's, you know, kind of cheat the system. He's going to take the path of least resistance to get the most amount of weight.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily equate to better performance in jiu-jitsu or another sport. It just gives you the best squat, which was what he's trying to achieve. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just different.
In his sport, because like you're saying,
in
his
his
sport's
sport.
not good for you, so sometimes you got to compromise things to be able to.
We're calling you out, Mark Ripto. Don't squat unless you have to.
And then as far as the Olympic lifts, I'm fine with the Olympic lifts as long as, I mean, just understand they're technical and, you know, find someone who's really good at coaching them. Understand there's a lot of progressions being built in, and you know, like I said before, understand what the end goal is. Like, you're using all of these movements to make you either healthier, you know, feel better, or better at your chosen sport. Unless you are getting gold medals in the Olympics,
Yeah.
I mean, it's two totally different things.
Yeah, I've been using them just with like a PVC pipe, just kind of like almost like a yoga style, but like a fast-paced movement system, which, you know, I do things like yoga and other things as well, but I've been warming up with like really focusing on technique with Olympic lifts only to like grease the grooves in my joints. Like,
Yeah, and the
but
Olympic
never
lifts
really loading.
require an awful lot of mobility, which a lot of people don't have, particularly with the snatch.
Right.
I mean, just me personally, like, I was terrible at the overhead squat. And then I started looking at it one day. I'm like, you know, it's probably something I should be able to do.
Yes.
I don't necessarily need to be doing it at 300 pounds, but I probably should be able to, you know, squat a certain amount of weight overhead safely. And if I can't, then there's something dysfunctional in my body that I need to fix.
Yes. And let's touch on alternative tools. So kettlebells, maces, what do you think of resistance bands? Like,
I mean, it's all just training.
it's all
right?
just training.
I mean,
I've been using, so like I can overhead squat a light amount overhead, but I have a 22.5 mace and I over squat with that. The main thing that I focus on is trying to keep my balance and my stability while doing it. But it's still not heavy, but I'm overhead squatting though. I am doing it and I'm keeping the position.
and no one says you have to overhead squat heavy to be great at jiu-jitsu or to be, you know, to move really well or to, you know, to be healthy. So, I mean, there are other things you can do that will, you know, that will address the issues that you're trying to address. And above all, you know, with training, making sure you move well without compensation or eliminating as many compensations as possible is the number one thing you should do.
Absolutely.
Just own your movement and be able to control your own body weight and then build from there. And I see way too many people who move poorly, cannot control their own body weight, cannot do push-ups well. And I look in the gym and they're doing like dumbbell bench press. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
It's not that, I mean, I would argue that that's not healthy for you, but like you're going to have better benefit from those dumbbell bench presses if you do push-ups really well.
Push-ups.
So take a step back and learn to do those really well, and then you're going to get maximum benefit.
So with that, how much of this new age thing that is this unconventional training with the maces and the kettlebells, how much of this is a fad like you saw in like the 80s, people were doing like aerobics, and then you ended up getting into the thing in the 90s where everybody's going to the gym and like we were talking about doing curls and stuff like that. How much of this is just like a transition period to where we're going to be able to move on to this next thing that's going to be able to be greater and more comprehensive?
I think it's all just training and it's all just movement. I mean, it's just playing. I mean, if you're out playing, like Jeremy takes maces out, he's just out there playing and working on skill. I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, I don't think they're necessarily, I mean, everything's a fad to a certain amount of population because all those people, everything's a fad to them because they're just going to try it, discard it, move on to the next thing because they don't really care anyway.
Nope.
So I mean, I don't see it as a fad, and I think that all that stuff. I mean, I think kettlebells have been around forever.
Yeah,
I mean,
Long time.
Yeah. So I think all that stuff's here to stay, and I think they're all just tools. I mean, number one thing with human movement is find something that you really enjoy doing, and then run with it. And make sure you move well and are addressing those things, and then.
I once saw a training video of some Russian wrestlers. I'm not really sure whether they were like
I've seen this
Greco-Roman or
video you're
something.
talking about.
And they were doing a bridge and he was balancing on his head. This is like from the 60s or maybe even earlier. It was black and white. Balancing on his head in a bridge, and he was doing pullovers with maybe like the beast. So about 100-pound kettlebell. Do you feel that I should do that 6 times a week? Or
Yes. Yes.
On the whole fad thing, I think it's funny because now this whole word of functional movement, it's functional movement. It's like, shouldn't that have been the whole purpose of working out this whole time? Like what?
And people have hijacked functional movement and given it a really bad name. And so a lot of people get really turned off, and it drives a lot of strength coaches nuts. But I mean, functional movement, I mean, all that means, it depends on what your goal is. Like anything can be functional depending on your goal. I mean, so many people think of functional movement where you're standing on a Bosu ball doing really light cable rows. I mean, that's not what I consider functional movement. I can consider functional movement for a jiu-jitsu guy like Turkish get-ups, pull-ups. I mean, there's a whole variety of things that I don't think fall into what's considered the functional movement crowd now. But I don't think that means that we just throw out the term functional movement because a bunch of people hijacked it and used it for something different.
Yeah. So we talked about the conventional powerlifting. We talked a little bit about Olympic lifting and the benefits. And you've already touched on it, but as far as the upper body, what are some of the basic movements or exercises we should be doing just as jiu-jitsu athletes?
Pull-ups, I think, are probably the best thing you can be doing, and doing them well and doing them strict. I think handstands are great if you can do them. As Dr. Spina says, if you have the prerequisites to do them, which would be, the wrist mobility. And I think crawling done correctly, I mean, people because a lot of people crawl now and some people are starting to be a backlash against it, but you'd be amazed how many people I've worked with that cannot crawl at all. Like not even on their knees. Like it just messes them up.
So when I do a crawl, I feel a lot of stress in my lower back. Is that
you got to flatten that thing?
You just flatten it out. It feels like my back is kind of like
you need to wear a weightlifting belt,
a girdle.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. It feels like I do need to wear a belt because it's like it feels like my back is concave.
Yeah, I mean, some of that's probably just, we can just cue it. Yeah, just cue it. We can probably cue it right out of you. So, but if we can't, then there's obviously something wrong and something that needs to be addressed. So the exercise serves its benefit. I think dips, if you can do them well, I shouldn't say if you can do them well, obviously if you can do them well, but if you can do them without pain, some people have had the history of shoulder stuff. Yeah, and it's just
I used to have bad pain when I would just go in the gym and mess around and try and do dips. And that's because I had the rolled shoulders and stuff. But now, this new program you have me on, I'm doing dips with no pain. I can barely do any of them. But that's the start, is just doing it without pain. And I think a lot of people work through pain, So, and then pull-ups. What are some of the common mistakes you see that people do with pull-ups, like crossing their legs and different things?
Yeah, I think people. I'm not a huge fan of crossing your feet. Too many people use way too much, body movement.
Kipping.
For lack of a better term.
Kipping?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the deal with kipping is I'm fine with kipping in CrossFit because it's part of the sport.
It's a high intense.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the sport. That doesn't mean I think you should be doing it in training if CrossFit's not your sport.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you don't have the shoulder mobility to do it, you certainly shouldn't be doing it, because doing a kipping pull-up and doing it well requires a lot of shoulder mobility.
And you need to realize that there's going to be some point, whether you're doing it well or not, you do that over and over again for years and years, you will have problems.
Wear on you. Yeah, it's definitely going to wear on you. And the thing is, like with CrossFit, I don't think they're probably doing as many kipping pull-ups, at least the people who really know what they're doing, that people think they are. I mean, that's just one small aspect of their whole training program. And I know, like, a lot of the guys who are really good, I mean, they do a lot of strict pull-ups and do them really well. The more problems with the pull-ups, they don't pull high enough. When they get to the top, they drive their
sissies.
Yeah, they drive their chin up, which is just causing all kinds of problems. You just sit here and snap your neck back and see how it feels. And that's all you're doing when you're doing pull-ups. They start in a poor position. Their elbows are already bent. I mean, that's a lot of people will cheat that really bottom portion,
that's
especially
terrible.
when we're doing negatives. And that's the part where most people struggle.
Yeah.
Like they're not trying to develop that portion of the pull-up at all.
Do you recommend rings. What's the difference mainly? Because we use a lot of rings, the Olympic rings that hang from the ceiling. Those 2 circle things. We do pull-ups from those, and just the regular bar. And what grip is the most? I mean, obviously it depends on what you're trying to do, but do you recommend just the forward? I mean, that's a pull-up. I mean,
overhand,
I think
overhand. Grip
Yeah,
is what
overhand.
you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. I think most people probably. I mean, a lot of people do it with the underhand
chin
grip.
up, stupid.
Yeah, like chin up, and they may think it's pull-ups.
Cheating.
So the difference between rings and the regular bar and what grips should people be using?
I mean, I think you should be doing every grip.
Okay.
Switch it up.
Yeah, and be as creative as you can. I mean, I think the rings are the best tool just because you can sort of their movement, so it's a little more of a challenge, but it allows you to sort of move to where your natural movement is. The bar's a little tougher if someone doesn't have good mobility. The reason why when you have your hand supinated or underhand grip is easier is because, I mean, your biceps fire a lot harder. You have the benefit of that. That's why you see a lot of people do that first, because that's just the easiest one for them to do. I think overhand can start to wear on some people's elbows and shoulders. That's why I always try and recommend a neutral grip for most people, if they're able to. But I always sort of defer to the rings. I think they're the.
What's funny with the pull-ups is in the Marine Corps, part of our fitness test was pull-ups, and whenever I first joined the Marine Corps, I would do all my pull-ups. I would do chin-ups. I would do them. You had the option of what grip you wanted to use. I used to be able to do like 21 underhanded, and then in my head I said, you know what? I'm going to see what this overhand thing's about. When I switched to an overhand grip, I could probably do 5.
Yeah.
And then I got to the
different.
point where I could do 20, and 20 overhand grip pull-ups is much easier than 20 chin-ups, underhand grip. You use so much more of your back when you have so many more muscles to use that it just feels a lot
stronger
tighter,
muscles.
feel a lot stronger.
If you know how to use them properly, or if you have them.
Yeah, it's weird.
And as of lately, with a lot of my pull-ups, I've been doing them at a super slow rate, and then sometimes I stay at the bottom and do kind of like shoulder rolls, because now I feel my T-spine.
like
and it feels
articulations.
good.
Yeah.
Is that what those are called? Articulations.
Yeah.
I'm not very articulate, so I don't really know all these words.
Yeah, I would do a lot of negatives whenever I was overseas. I worked extensively on negatives, nothing but negatives, and I'd do things where I'd do a half negative and I'd just move side to side.
Oh,
for
you're a
40
bartender.
reps. I got into the point where I could do a literal one-handed pull-up, dead from the bottom all the way up.
Hulk style.
Do that. And,
Badass.
for the negatives, a lot of people, if you can find a staircase that doesn't have, that's like a metal staircase that doesn't have a back end, and you do pull-ups all the way up the staircase, and then when you go down the staircase, you do negative. So you're sitting at the top in the pull-up position, and then you let go with one hand and let that other hand slowly let you down, then grab the next stair and put both hands on.
And
then switch hands and slowly let it down. That'll increase your strength.
And
like
you're
tenfold.
slowly becoming a cat burglar, so that
Yes.
you can get
You can
away on
sneak in
power
with
lines.
So
and
many
things.
benefits. Endless.
So, have you guys seen the movie 22 Jump Street? That was funny when Channing Tatum just runs up this building and he's like, "Come on," to Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill's like, "I'm not a superhero." I can't.
I work all the time and have a family. I don't get to watch movies, unfortunately.
You watch Up and cartoons.
Yeah.
Up is a great
And jiu-jitsu
movie.
DVDs.
Yeah. I just own a lot of jiu-jitsu DVDs. I haven't necessarily watched a lot of jiu-jitsu DVDs.
Cool. So, any other questions you guys can think of before we head out of here for David? Anything you can think of off the top of your heads?
Just mentally, what let's see, with mental training, do you think someone that's trying to train for an event should always be just going balls to the wall, like on cardio, like when they're at that peak? Do you think closer to competition they should just be trying to push that peak, or do you think that should be a constant throughout the training regimen?
I think you should do it more often as you get closer to a competition. I don't think you should be doing it all the time. And I think directly before the competition, I don't think you should be doing it at all. I think you should be letting your body recover.
Yeah.
I think there's always benefit to doing, putting yourself in really, we just call it in really deep waters.
Assault bike.
Yeah,
That's what he's talking
pretty
about.
good at that. I think that, and I've seen it firsthand, the benefit it has, and I've felt it firsthand. When you go somewhere and it's really, really nasty, like you're like, man, I'm not finishing this. I'm not gonna make it, and you tell yourself, like, I always tell myself, like, this will pass. Like 30 minutes from now, I will feel fine, and I'll be so pissed off if I quit.
Now.
Yeah, so and I think it does something to you mentally, like, just to be able to push through that. And I certainly think that transfers to jiu-jitsu. I think it transfers to life in general. But I think there's a lot of benefit, and again, not all the time. Every once in a while, putting yourself in really deep waters and just sort of like embracing it and being like, this is really awful, but I'm going to be all right, and I'm going to get through it, and everything's going to be fine.
I'm going to throw up. I'm going to let you know. I'm throwing up when I'm done.
What advice do you have maybe for someone who has been doing so much training and everything that they're getting to the point where they're putting the reps in, but they're not giving it 100%? What advice do you have to get that person to be putting in that 100% instead of just getting the 10 reps, like maybe going down away from what they should be or something like that?
I mean, again, just constantly reminding them why they're there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy. Like, that doesn't happen, I don't think, a lot in our gym, because we're monitoring so much of it that we know where guys should be training and whatever they're doing, that we're able to make sure that they're staying motivated and they're doing the things they're supposed to do. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure.
How do you feel about, because this is kind of a close cousin to that question. How do you feel about like online strength and conditioning coaches that it's like, oh, you email me this and then I'll email you this back, and there's no supervision over these people working out? I mean, I guess they could be using videos maybe now.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of that. I mean, you have to, as far as whether or not it'll work for you, like, you have to be disciplined.
Right.
Most people who get online programs like that, and I've actually, not only have I programmed for people that way, I've purchased them that way. Most people who seek stuff like that out are already motivated.
Professionals. And
well, they're motivated. Like, if you're finding like a really good person to program for you, like, you're not new to this stuff.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
you've done your research, and there's, you put the money down, and there's a reason why you're seeking these people out, like, to get their professional opinion. Now, as far as the technique, that's a totally different story. If I'm going to program something that I feel like is technical and I can't be there, like, I'm adamant that they find somebody at
else.
least for a couple sessions, and on top of that, like, there's going to be a serious progression built into it.
So you're a free market capitalist.
And that's one benefit I love of working out with other people in the room. Like, even if they're not doing the same program, if they are, it's a plus. But yeah, like,
it's proven. I mean, it's like, they've done tons of studies on it. There's no question. Now, there are guys who can train on their own, and they're beasts. And I'm not saying it can't be done, because there are a lot of guys who do it. But I mean, there's a ton of research that shows
you
when
put
you're
girls
in
around me, woo, do I get them reps?
When you're in an environment like these guys have been in, where there's people around you with completely different goals,
right?
Mm-hmm. But the end goal is the same: is to be the best at what they're training to be. There's no question it changes you.
Yeah, I mean, you can. This happened at the gym one time when we couldn't. Me and Felix couldn't make it to your gym, David, because maybe you're out of town or something, weather or something. So we went to Prairie Life, and this older guy was next to me on a rower, and we sat next to him to start to row. And as we rode, we noticed the other guy started going harder, and it's just like a psychological thing. Like, if people are there, you're gonna push yourself.
His technique was flawed for sure.
I've done that at David's. I did that the other day when I was on the bike. I saw that guy that walked in and was standing over there, and I was like, "Hey, David." Yeah, that guy came in. I started actually putting out more.
Yeah. So when you see guys, you tend to put out.
No,
yes.
I don't put out for anything. Not on the first thing.
Okay, cool. So I guess that kind of leaves us here towards the end. Is there anything you'd like to say, David? Any advice, any words of wisdom to athletes out there trying to better themselves, trying to be healthy? Any last words from you?
How can people reach you if they want to train?
Yeah, anything you want to plug.
Yeah, well, they can just go to, they can email me, dave@resilienthp.com, HP as in health and performance. The last thing I say, just learn to move well first of all, surround yourself. Like we always use this quote: if you want to be a lion, you've got to train with lions. Like surround yourself with lions in every aspect of your life. People that make you better. Find someone who really knows. At least one time, like have a professional assess you, or figure out what's going on in your body. Fix it, learn to move better, load that movement, and just become a monster. And then the entire time when you train, be mindful, like embrace it. Like it drives me insane when people train and they're just like, oh, like I can't, well, just whine about it. Don't do it then. Yeah. Like embrace the process. Like the days it's gonna suck, embrace the suck. The days when you're doing mobility and it's supposed to be, you know, like an off day, be mindful, like embrace it. Go in and do the things that you're supposed to be doing. When you're training, like think about what you're trying to do. Like training movements are skills. Like when you're training your skill in jiu-jitsu, like you're focused, you're dialed in, you're being really mindful, you're trying to feel things. It's the same thing when you're doing a deadlift, if you really want to be good at the deadlift.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Awesome. That's great advice. Be mindful and become a beast.
No, I heard be mindful while you play with large pussies. But that was just
I just have one quick edit. I said that Founders was out of North Carolina. I was wrong. It's out of Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Sorry
You were
about that.
you were close.
Founders,
Sorry.
you are sponsoring
Sorry,
this
guys.
podcast, and we expect our checks or our beer in the mail. We'll give you the P.O. box.
Yeah, it's
later.
very nice.
All right, this is Justin with Technique is King signing off.
Thanks, guys. This is Jeremy. See you later.
It's Jordan. Keep it easy.